Yo, what's up guys? Hey, Adam McDaniel here with JeepRecyclers.com. Hope you guys are having a wonderful day. Lately I've seen quite a few posts in all the Facebook groups with people having issue with their gauge cluster motherboard, more specifically the 74 to 85. And so I figured what I would do is just shoot a video highlighting some of the things that I do to test motherboards and, you know, some of the troubleshooting, you know, little shticks that I have that I use. That might help you out there. And also if you stick around to the end, I'll show you some ways to save money. So why am I standing in front of our Grand Wagoneer here? We've affectionately named it the Fire Jeep, as you can tell. So the reason why I'm standing in front of this Jeep is to highlight when you work on electrical, when you work on clusters, motherboards, etc., this is a possibility end. So I'm only saying that so that you can understand the seriousness of working on electrical. The phrase, it's good enough, can't really apply to electrical because it just can't. So this right here is, we're assuming that it was an amp meter that started this fire, and I met the owner and it was his pride and joy, and it was, he spent lots of money on this and it pretty much toasted the whole thing. So but again, be very, very cautious when working on electrical, especially 40-50 year old electrical. If you go in, you see wires rubbing, if you see chafing, address it, take care of it. I would never say, it's just good enough, you know. Just take a minute and fix it. I can't stress that enough, and that alone will probably save you just all kinds of issues in the future there. So Shelby, just want to kind of give them a little insight. I saw pictures of it before. I wish I kept the photos, but the owner just had it parked in the backyard. He took it out. He was on his way back from a drive, and he went out and had a great drive, enjoyed it, parked it in the backyard, and his wife yelled that the Jeep was on fire. They came out and she was cooking. So if you look closely, it looks like it to me. I'm not a fire marshal, fire expert in any way, but it looks like it started here, which is right where your amp meter is, and just spread. It didn't really go backwards. However, the frame is toast, the hood obviously is burnt. I mean, every wire in this thing is melted. None of it can really be trusted. So that's it. All right. So that being said, it is serious, but I'll say you can do it. Don't let the mental demons kind of cook you alive, you know. So basically just one step at a time, one move at a time, and just be as thorough as you possibly can. And in the end, I think you'll be really happy with the results. But take your time. That's all. All right. That's it. Okay, back in the shop here. All right, so before we start, let me just say my formal education is in the field of exercise, and the correlations between exercise or physiology and automotive is eerily similar. Okay, so I have a story. It'll make sense basically on some of the later things I get into here. All right, so you ever work out or work outside, what have you? You got a sweaty t-shirt, and you take the t-shirt off, you throw it in your car, and you forget about it for a couple days. You go back in, and it smells so bad that you probably need some kind of exorcism to like kill that smell in your car. All right. So basically what that is sweat has amino acids in it. And as you add amino acids and electrolytes together, and they form a bond, and essentially the amino acids work as a fuel source to push those electrolytes, and that's where you get that kind of funk smell, and it smells awesome. Now, relating to your car, the 12-volt system that you have in your car is like the amino acids driving energy, okay? And the electrical connections in our beloved full-size Jeeps are pretty bad, to say the least. They're pretty open air, they're not airtight, and you get a lot of moisture in those connections, okay? And so moisture has electrolytes, sodium, potassium, magnesium, that sort of thing, okay? And add 12-volt system to it, and now that basically helps grow corrosion, okay? Now, the visual look of corrosion is not always the same. So you've probably seen your car battery sometimes when it gets, you know, overly corroded and you get all that white chalky crap on it. That's obvious you have corrosion buildup. However, in electrical connections, it's not always so obvious. A lot of times you'll have corrosion buildup and visually it looks fine. However, it has corrosion. So before we get into like replacing gauges and checking motherboards and all that, first thing I always do is I clean. And this is kind of a boring subject, but I just can't stress enough to always start from the easiest things first and then kind of work your way progressive to the more aggressive things, versus pulling an engine the second, you know, your speedometer doesn't work. So now there's a couple of tools I like to use. Let me just start with the product here. I've talked about this in one of my videos here already. So it's isopropanol alcohol, and this stuff's awesome, man. You can dilute it to use on paint. You can, you know, there's so many different things that you can do with this product right here. But specifically in what we're talking about right here, it kills corrosion and basically kills that bacteria which would stop electrical connections from working. So what I like to do is work my way through electrical connections and clean them. But essentially, let's see, I have a couple of tools that I like to use. Let's talk about those tools. These are diamond bit little cleaning tools, and this is basically for, let's see, this is a male, so going into a female, and I have different sizes here. This is perfect for cleaning, I call it the Gatling gun, so cleaning inside this little plug right here. And these guys are also diamond bit little cleaning guys right here, and these are awesome for like that little ground plug right here, so you can kind of get inside and clean that out. Let's see, the other one I have, so this right here is a female type, which basically goes over top, so on the back of your motherboard, so you have those pins that are sticking out. This is great for basically cleaning those guys off right there. And that's it. So these are the tools that I use right here, and I use these in connection or along with the IPA. So essentially what I do is I get a little bit of IPA, and I use this for an example, and I'll spray a little bit into the connections here, and from there what I'll do is just basically take my diamond bit, go inside, clean it out, scrub it, get my IPA, basically rinse it out, and now I have a clean connection. Now, this is a start, so it may not be the end-all solving for all your issues, but it's a start. So let's say you clean all these little connections and you notice a small improvement, a little improvement, okay? So at that point is where you go, okay, let me reverse engineer and start going through the wires. Let me depend this. Let me go back to the, I mean, there's all kinds of things that you can do at that point. But it's a great starting point to kind of help trying to figure things out here, all right? So again, the little diamond bits, these things are awesome. I'll add links into the video itself so you can see here on these guys. Okay, let's see. So cleaning connections. Also, always follow it up with some kind of dielectric. Like I said, the connections are pretty horrible, to say the least. And so, since the connections are so bad, always put some kind of moisture barrier in there. And so dielectric, man, I can't tell you how much dielectric grease I go through, but just a little dielectric is a little insurance to help keep out some of that moisture. One more before I go to the overhead shooting. All right, now let's see, the metal plates on your motherboard assembly here are actually the ground for the gauges to the motherboard itself, okay? Now, on the back of the gauges, there's little prongs that stick off, okay? And those little prongs right there make contact with the metal backing board, and they ground to this metal backboard right here. Now, these guys also get really corroded, okay? So if you go in and just basically scrub or clean the back where this makes contact right there, That's one more step. I paint these, or I sandblast and paint them. And before I put these on, I actually have to go in and kind of rough up the areas where this makes contact so that it actually works. So it's just corrosion management. It's amazing what it can do to you. It lowers horsepower, it strains your vehicle, it just does so many bad things. So the more on top of corrosion management that you are, just the better off your life's gonna be. So that's it, let's go to step 2. All right, so before moving on, let me go back to the original analogy I started with. All right, so sweat, amino acids, etc., growing. Basically, when I'm working on a motherboard, I always wear gloves because the sweat from your hands, no matter how clean your hands are, even the sweat on your hands can create an electrical interruption. And it may create an electrical interruption. And so any little thing that you can possibly do to eliminate the possibility of issues, the better off. In fact, before I start any project, the first thing I do is think about what can go wrong. And then I reverse engineer from there to try and cut out as many of those as I possibly can. So again, I always wear gloves when I'm working on this motherboard assembly to make sure that none of my fingerprints or sweat or anything gets on this board so that it doesn't grow and create other issues here, okay? Now, if you have your motherboard basically broken down to this level here, okay, what I would personally do is take the IPA, the isopropyl alcohol, and wipe the entire board down. Pins, connections, everything, and just ensure that there is no corrosion buildup, there is nothing that is gonna stop this board from working, okay? Now, when I'm inspecting a motherboard, I look at all the ribbons very closely, okay, to see if there's any interruptions, to see if you have any little cracks, kinks, anything like that, to see if there's an area that might need to be either soldered. You can do ribbon tape. There's a bunch of different ways to basically fix motherboard or printed motherboard assemblies here. And the area that I like to really focus on is right where the amp meter goes, okay? So if you have blackening on your motherboard already, more than likely your amp meter got really hot and started to melt or create issue in your motherboard. So from this little circuit right here, even if you can't see some kind of interruption, if it starts to blacken on the motherboard itself, I would do an ohm test or basically ohm side to side here of these ribbons to see if you have any kind of resistance. And so if you have resistance, then you know that, hey, I have some kind of interruption right here and either it needs to be replaced or I need to fix it somehow, you know, whether I'm soldering, whether I'm doing the ribbon. I mean, there's a couple different ways to do that. One more thing before I go to the next here. All right, so we used to get little tiny screws and replace the pins on these because the pins would get loose over time. So I'll put a link, basically what size the screw is. So if you just need to pick these up, just go to a hardware store. I mean, we used to sell a little kit, but it just doesn't make sense because it costs more to ship it than it costs to even buy the screws. So I just remember to add that in. So if you do want to replace your pins, these little tiny screws, they work great. Okay, all right. So moving on to tools that we're going to use to check all the gauges here. All right, so first 12 volt power source, battery, power probe. I've got all kinds of leads. Let's see. This is a potentiometer. If you're a musician, you probably know what this is right here. This is actually going to help set ohms or dial in the ohms so we can actually set each of the gauges to where we need them to, and a multimeter. Now, at the beginning, I talked about saving money. Now, our fuel gauges that we sell. So we sell fuel gauges for $120, and that's pretty freaking expensive. And this is a way for you to make your own fuel gauge and save yourself some money, okay? I have a massive secret. So a fuel gauge is actually an oil gauge, okay? A fuel gauge is an oil gauge. Now, if you're not very electrical and all these tools I just mentioned, you're like, no way, man. You can just take your fuel gauge cover pop off this cover, stick that on, and you'll now have a fuel gauge. It won't be completely accurate. It'll be a little low. So in other words, where it's supposed to be half tank, you'll have a little less than half tank. So it won't be perfect. I'm going to show you how to make it perfect though. Okay. So if you do need a fuel gauge, then here you go. This is a way for you to save money, or you can just buy the ones from us that we restore, and you'll see all the crap that I go through to switch it over to a fuel gauge and understand why it costs as much as it does. Now, the reason I'm sharing this with you, for one thing, I'm always going to try and figure out ways to save money with you, or share ways with you to save money. This is an expensive hobby, and every time that you don't spend as much, you'll have a little more to spend on the next part, and the next part, and the next part, to be able to reach the goal that you basically have with your build. And if my goal is to save the full-size Jeep, then as many of you that know how to do this as possible, the better. All right, if that makes sense. So the more of you that know how to do this stuff, the better it's going to be. All right, and I'll do my best, as much as I screw up talking on this freaking stupid camera, to get that information across. So that's it. All right, and that's all. All right, we're back. All right, so before moving to the overhead camera, I wanted to just kind of do a little walk around of the whole setup I have here. And I'll draw a photo of this, or have some kind of diagram lined up so that you can look at it and use it yourself. But basically, here's what we have set up here. So 12 volt power source going to our power probe, and our power probe is simulating like your key. So when you turn your key on, and it powers up the dash. So that's what the red lead is. So power going to the cluster. Now the green lead is basically going out to the sending unit itself. Okay, so this basically represents the line going from what I call the Gatling gun plug to the sending unit, whether it be oil, temperature, or fuel. All right, now the next part right here is, this is a potentiometer, and anybody who's, I don't know, played music or been in a band or whatever, it looks very familiar. But it's basically just, it allows you to change the resistance going from the cluster to the sending unit itself. Okay, now I have the multimeter here in place so that I can basically set the potentiometer to the exact ohms that I want it to be. Okay, and then I have my cheat sheet over here, so basically all the ohm settings and different list of information here. Now, one thing I will say here, and I'll include this as either a download or something here, but all right, so it says beginning of the power band. All right, so I'm looking at the oil pressure gauge. Actually, no, let's look at temperature gauge. Okay, so it says beginning of the band, 36 ohms, and the very coldest is 73 ohms. Okay, now all that basically means is from here, the temperature gauge out, that first line right there is the band. Okay, and the end line before it goes into hot is the end of the band. So basically from one line to the next line. And if you look at your settings here, I need to update my glasses. Let's see, if you look at your settings here, you can see that the end of band is 13, but hot is 9. So basically, the warmer it gets, the less resistance that you're gonna have coming off that gauge. And so basically it keeps on climbing right there. So that's it. All right, so I'm going to, well, I'll leave one part out. So the other end of the potentiometer is going around to my ground, okay, on the battery. However, the ground is actually the sending unit. Okay, so if that makes sense, the ground is the sending unit, and the resistance that you receive back is the data that registers on the gauge itself. So as it's hot, you'll have less resistance. As it's cold, you'll have more resistance, whether it's oil pressure or temperature. And when you have more fuel, you have less resistance. And when you have less fuel, you have more resistance. So make sure I didn't spin that around backwards. But anyhow, so so that's it. So this is the setup that we currently have, and it's pretty straightforward once you get it figured out here. So, all right, on to the next part. Okay, now we're going to test the gauges here. All right, now if you notice, I have an oil gauge here where the fuel gauge is supposed to go. And if you notice here, the oil pressure gauge is a little wonky. It's actually at the beginning of the power band rather than going all the way down to 0. So I got to take a look at that. Now these are all brand new. So all the gauges here are new. And even though they're new, they're still electrical. So you do have the possibility of having some issue here. So, all right, now the steel boards, or I should say the metal boards, they have to be connected to the motherboard to test the gauges. Okay, so make sure that you have your, let's see, your screws. Make sure you have your screws attached to the two places where you can see that there's silver, and on the original one, kind of a gold color, or I should say bronze color. On this one right here that has like it's more of like a wood screw or heavy metal screw. This needs a washer on it, and just make sure that that there's no corrosion, everything's cleaned up, and it's attached as well as it can be. Make sure that the board itself, where this attaches, is also clean. Make sure there's no corrosion buildup. And again, remember, going back to the idea as far as corrosion, as far as visual, just I would never go by visual. Just clean it, just to make sure. Use your IPA. Use just little scuffy pads. I use these guys pretty consistently for just kind of cleaning spots, just to do little tests and checks and that sort of thing. All right, now the way this board works, it's pretty simple, but the power flows to the board through what's called the CVR. Okay, and that's the temperature gauge essentially. So if you run power directly to your fuel gauge or your oil pressure gauge, you're going to melt them both immediately, or possibly damage your board and do some other issues here. So this temperature regulator for the board will drop 12 volts down to 3 to 5 volts before giving it to the temperature, or excuse me, the fuel and or oil. So if you put direct 12 volts to these guys, they're done. Okay. The only thing you can really put 12 volts to directly are the lights. The lights are designed to receive 12 volts. Okay. So you've got 3 prongs on the back right here. All right. The one that receives power is this top right hand corner. Okay. So top right hand corner is basically what you're going to put your power probe on. And speaking of power probe, so I'm using a power probe for this because I use a power probe for pretty much everything. I love power probes. However, if you do not have one, you can run a direct line from your positive terminal to this. However, you absolutely have to install a 1 to 5 amp fuse in between the two. Okay. All right. I'll be using the power probe, and I'll be hooking the main power up to this line right here. And this is the ground right here at the beginning. So this is number, let me switch over. This is number 4 pin, and this is it. So this is your ground. Okay. And let's get rocking here. Okay. So the first gauge I always test is the temperature gauge, because if the temperature gauge isn't working properly, none of the other gauges are going to work. So it doesn't really make sense to jump to the other gauges if the temperature gauge isn't working. Actually, before I get ahead of myself, I have an oil gauge here. Remember, I told you before I was going to show you how to turn this into a fuel gauge. So we're going to leave that there. Now I'm going to come back to this one. So if I were testing this board without converting this, or if I've already converted it, I would just simply do a temperature gauge. I would do the fuel sending, or the fuel gauge, and then I would go to the oil. Okay, and then that's it from there. So, but we're going to skip this, come over here, and I'm work way back over here because I'm going to show you how to get that set up properly here. Okay, so let me get the power probe set up. All right, so the first gauge, like I said, I'm going to test is the temperature gauge. So what I'm going to do, I have my potentiometer set up here, and as far as what little prongs, so the center one on the potentiometers, 3 of them. The 2 outers are basically grounds, okay? The inner is the one that is going to basically send power to the gauge itself, okay? Now, we are going to check the temperature. So what I'm going to do is, let me get my cheat sheet. For the temperature gauge, I'm going to run it all the way up to the top band, which is 13 ohms. So I have my ground going out to the battery, and I have the, let's see, I have the green lead. I'm going to bring that back around and put it on number 10. All right, so number 10 is the temperature gauge, and that one is basically just the bottom one right here. Okay, so let me get that set on here, and I'm going to set up the potentiometer here now. So I have the lead going to the potentiometer, the middle prong here. I have the negative ground going on the outside, wrapping around to the ground on the battery. Now I have the 2 leads going to the multimeter, and all I'm going to do is turn my multimeter on, set it for continuity, or excuse me, set it to resistance or ohms, and the number I'm looking for, what did I say, 13. So this dial, since I have the ground on the outside, I'm going to turn to the left to turn it down, and this can be a little tricky. So when you get it close, just stop for a second and see if it catches up. So even if you bump it, it wants to dance a little bit on you. So if it's not exactly 13, it's okay. The range is normally like 1. So there we go, 13. Okay. All right. So remember, this is simulating going to our temperature sending unit under the hood, and at 13, let's see, so at 13 ohms, we have, I'm looking at my little cheat sheet, and I'll add this on the video. Well, it's the end of the band, and it's hot. So this is going to be, you know, just before overheating, so you're looking at, what, 215, 220, etc. right here. So you're going to be climbing up right here. And like I said, you bump it, and it can change. Like being on a first date, you got to be careful. Sound of the gun. All right, good. Okay. All right, so I have my ground hooked up. I have my power hooked up to the back of the temperature gauge, top right-hand corner. All right. It may have popped off. Let's see. Nope. So we're doing a full sweep, and right there. Good. Okay, now you're going to see this bumping around quite a bit, so it probably changed to 15 or so right before I picked it up here. So, but that's a good sweep. So it's going to come all the way back down, and it's going to take a little bit here. So, all right. So that's working just fine. All right, we're going to move over to the, what do we have, oil pressure gauge. So for the oil pressure gauge, let's see, I'm going to do a full sweep as well. I like doing full sweeps because it lets me know if, you know, for one, if it's going all the way up or not. The inside, in fact, I'm probably going to open this up right here with us, find out what's going on here in a second. So let's see, let me set my ohms. All right, let's do 13 to 15. Actually, that's fine where it's at. And my oil gauge is number 3, which is right next to your ground right here. So let me take this lead, set it over here. Please stay. Okay, when I did that, you can see my ohms changed. So let's go back to 13. 13 to 15 is 60 psi. So at 60 psi, imagine your vehicle just started, your oil is cold, so you're going to have more pressure, okay? And more pressure is going to be less resistance. All right, so basically more pressure, less resistance. As your vehicle warms up and the oil starts to thin a little bit, the pressure comes down, you're going to have more resistance. So more resistance is going to register a higher number here. So let's see, let's start at the top of the band, 13 to 15. We got to set at 13, and you see it's kind of stuck right here. So right about, yep, 60 psi. So that's good. And let's see if that gets unstuck. I like watching paint dry, watching this come down here. Negative is staying stuck. Okay, so all right, so I want to see what's inside, what's going on inside, because something is stopping it from coming all the way down. So let's see. Now to open this up, this face up here, basically you have a little. It's basically just crimped around this whole piece, and right in the center, there's actually an indentation on the gauge itself, or I should say on the metal base itself. And there's also another one on the bottom, so it helps you line this up. But when you go to pry this up, last thing you want to do is try to muscle this and have it pop off, because that little guy is about as fragile as anything you're going to touch on your vehicle. Okay, so that arm or indicator can easily pop off, and that makes life pretty awesome. All right, so all I'm going to do is I just take this little hook and work my way around. That's a lot easier when you're not filming. Oh, there you go. All right, so we got lucky and it actually popped right off pretty good here. Okay, so when I do this, you have to bring it out and slowly bring it out here. All right. Let's put it back in and see what happens. By the way, when you're putting these in, newer gauge, I find, like this is a brand new one, newer gauges, this part's a little thicker, I found, versus like an original one. So it seems like so this is an original one. It just seems like there's more, or I beg your pardon, less here and more here on the newer one. So it doesn't always fit in here perfectly. So I just take my little pick and kind of clean this out. And sometimes I take a small pair of pliers and just kind of open up those two prongs right there. Because basically these are just like location prongs here. So it just keeps them in place. All right, so here. And the only thing holding these gauges on is that little cardboard looking backer. So if you tighten these up too much, I mean, you rip these right off. So it's really, these are just really fragile. So just take your time. I always tighten a little bit on each side until I'm happy, but you cannot crank down on these things. And of course, always just make sure that you're sitting actually flush, because sometimes when you do this, you'll get a little gap. You'll get a little gap in there which I think we have. Yeah, we have a little gap, which means I need to adjust that a little bit better. So, and if you have that little gap, these little connections here are not going to be able to make contact with that board, and you're going to be upset. Let's see. All right, so I don't take it all the way off. I just loosen it up a little bit, try and find those locations. And I did actually have to bend these two tabs up right here to get this to stick on here. Yeah, there it is. I don't know if you just heard that pop or not. Alright, let's see, double check the resistance. Alright, so this is oil pressure. Okay, 13 to 15. Moved a little bit. Okay, so I got 13.2. Not sure if you can see that. Okay, so I got 13.2. Alright, and here we go. Let's see what happens. That's odd. Well, so you can adjust these, okay, and I'll show you here on this this oil pressure gauge, but I don't want to adjust it because the ohm rating is bringing it all the way to the correct spot. So if I adjust it, it'll be less. So it's starting at the power band, and typically it starts basically, or a big barn, it's starting currently at the power band, right? Which is basically beginning that little line, where'd it go? Which is beginning here. And it typically goes all the way down below 0, and then when you power on, it'll bring you up to 0 right here, and then as you start, it'll bring you up to whatever your temperature is. Now right now, I set the ohm range to hit 60 psi, and it's at 60 psi. It's just simply coming all the way down, stopping at 0 versus going all the way down, which is not typical. So, all right, it's working though. So let's see. So all I'm going to do is ride this back on right here, and you can see the little, there's a tip of this gauge, or I should say there's a tip of this faceplate, and there's a small indentation here. It doesn't fit in there, but I'm pointing this out as far as alignment. And you can see on the top there's a small indentation here. So this does clip, or I should say this faceplate does clip into that part right there. So basically just line it up. Make sure that you have all the edges on the outside and inside. Sometimes you need to give a little bit of motivation. Alright, see these little tiny clips right here? They're not clips, but see how it's crimped down? So sometimes you got to take these and kind of open them up a little bit. I wouldn't force it because they're just little pieces of aluminum. And they break pretty easily here. That's more better. Okay. Okay. Money. Okay. You can press it down a little bit. It's not really needed. This is just such lightweight aluminum here that the less you manipulate it, the better. And this does have one of our stickers on it in case you're wondering why it looks a little different. I do that because I make them all the same. And by the way, I don't think I mentioned in the earlier video, so I did mention that the oil gauge, you can turn into a fuel gauge. However, there's two gauges on the site. All right, so one's for the 74, 75, and the next one up is for the 76 to 91. The 74 to 75 is quite a bit less expensive than the next one up. Okay, now if you buy both of them, they're two different brands, and I'm not going to mention the brand here, so you can probably guess why. They're the same. They're the same gauge. They're identical in every way. All right, ohm readings, every single thing, part of that is the same. So you can purchase the less expensive gauge and use it. So the less expensive meaning the 74, 75 gauge, and use it on your 75 to 91 instrument cluster, and just replace that faceplate or put our sticker on, or however you want to do it. But it's the same gauge, all right, just so you're fully aware, all right. And this is the earlier one, as you can see, and all I'm going to do is replace this and set this up here. All right, I put this back on. Alternate, don't tighten one all the way down. Just kind of slowly snug it, and just see how it's riding down. And if you accidentally hit that needle, don't reach in and pull it back up. I'll show you something here in a second. Okay, if you do touch that needle and it bends down, just grab a small piece of plastic, and all you want to do is just kind of pull it up just a little bit. You don't want to try and, let's see, you don't want to try and take your little pry bar and pull up on it. Man, that thing snaps so easily, it's ridiculous. I should have had something ready to show you. But I have this little piece of plastic, just a flat piece of plastic. It's nothing special. Just slide it underneath in between the arm itself and the faceplate. And all you want to do is just try to give it shape again and just pull it out. And it doesn't have to be completely straight. It doesn't have to be far out. I mean, just a little bit so it's not dragging, because it will drag and it will not show the correct pressure there for you. So just a little heads up there. All right. Money. Also, I use purple Loctite on these nuts. When I'm finally done with everything, I just use a small dab of purple Loctite just to keep everything exactly where I want it to be there. Purple Loctite is really not an aggressive, it's really not an aggressive holder, but it does kind of hold things in position, which is nice. Let's see. All right, next to that, all right, so now let's swing back up to this fuel gauge right here, okay? Now, I'm gonna set this up, or I should say, I'm gonna set the ohm range to check half tank on this, so you can just see for yourself how far off it is. And once again, remember, don't ever give power directly to a gauge. You'll be buying another gauge. All right, so going to my cheat sheet, let's see, so for the fuel gauge, so for half a tank, that's 23 ohms. Okay, so again, half a tank is 23 ohms. So let's see. All right, so let's go. And pretty darn close. See, I got 23.6 here. Okay, so this is basically registering as, so when I'm doing 23.6 ohms, and that's half a tank. All right, so if your fuel was to, let's see, as you burn fuel, as you burn fuel, you are going to, let's see, increase resistance, increase ohms. All right, so as you burn fuel and this lowers, your resistance will go higher. Okay, so let's see, so we're set to 23. Let me go to my cheat sheet, and the fuel gauge is number 7. And again, I'm going to have this diagram I'm using either as a download, but on the video as well. All right, so number 7 is the 3rd pin down. Okay, so basically all you do is count from up, 1, 2, 3. 2, 3. I'm putting my terminal there. And if you notice, I just did that and it made a change on my resistance. Not enough to really mess with me though, because I think we're still at 23 for half tank, so that's good. All right. And you want to try not to let these guys cross and hit each other here. All right, let's see, stay at 23. And if you get close, just kind of wait for a second. Money. All right. All right, so at 23, we're going to be coming up to right about the center here. But if this is a fuel gauge with a fuel gauge faceplate, that's going to be a little under. So I'm going to switch out this faceplate here so you can see what I'm referring to, and put it on, and you can see it come up just so close. Okay, and then we'll show you how to make it perfect here after that. All right, so okay, now I've actually removed the other faceplate, so that one came off pretty easily. This one has not come off yet, so it's going to be a little bit tighter. And the other one, all I did was kind of pop right here, and it came right off. But typically, I work my way all the way around, because you don't want it to come popping off so aggressively that you end up messing up your needle here. So just, and all I do, I'm just prying. So you see here, as I'm going up, I'm just kind of prying it up here. This is just a little 90-degree pick, and I'm just bending this up. And I find it's easy to get in there with this to kind of bend it up, and then I come back with the world's smallest pry bar and just kind of finish the job here. All right, money. I even hold it down so it doesn't come exploding out there. Same as before, you basically just slide it on. Again, use the little protrusion here on the tip to line that up. Make sure this is lined up. And sometimes, yep, this one has to be bent back out. Because I can't stress how thin this aluminum is right here. It's kind of like the, actually not kind of, it is like the face plates that are like the speedometer face plate and like the oil pressure face plate. And if you bend it even a little bit, it just, those kinks, they just they kind of live there after that. Okay. So forgive me if I'm not holding it perfect here, so you can see I promise to get better. All right, let's see. So that's lined up. Oh, you son of a. Okay, just so you know, I'm leaving this up right now. Okay, I'm taking this faceplate off, but right now I got everything lined up, and I want you just to see how it goes. But I don't want to keep manipulating this little piece of aluminum and have it end up breaking on me there. I got about 10,000 of these little ones, but I already have a sticker and stuff already on this one. So let's see. So let's put it back on. And make sure you're it's gonna bite me in the butt, I know it is. Okay, again, just make sure that your slots are lined up and this is popped into place here. And alternate tightening these down so you're not trying to tighten one down completely. Alright, we are attached. Is that in there? It's in there-ish. Make sure that this is lined up with that. Alright. Again, the ground back to the ground. Alright, the power probe back to the top right hand. The CVR of the temperature gauge, which is the voltage regulator for the board. And your fuel gauge is number 7, which is the third one down. 1, 2, 3. Alright, multimeter. All right, so temperature gauge, or excuse me, fuel gauge, 23 ohms is, oh, look at that. Buy a freaking lottery ticket today. Jesus. Or Jesus, excuse me. All right, so there, here. Please don't pop off. Okay. So if you just replaced your faceplate, well, that didn't work out. Oh, I'm touching them. They're crossing. Wait a minute, let's reset. Okay. So we're set at 23. All right, it's the next day. All right, guys, so something awesome happened yesterday while filming, or I should say the last section of the video that you saw, I was testing the fuel gauge, and while doing it, it pegged, okay? So the video died after that. However, I kept talking to myself for the next 45 minutes, so that was awesome. So what I did in the next 45 minutes was test the fuel gauge a couple more times, checked my ground, checked all my connections, made sure that everything was attached correctly or properly, and then what I did was go back and then test the temperature gauge again. Okay, so remember, the temperature gauge gives power to both the fuel and the oil. Okay, so if you have any issue with either one of those, your default should be go right back to that temperature gauge and check that. Okay, so I did that and it pegged as well. Okay, so the temperature gauge pegged, which meant that both the oil and the fuel are going to peg as well. Okay, so I pulled that off. I cleaned the back end of it. All right, the little connection here that makes contact with the board. I cleaned the pegs and basically just put it right back down again, tested it again, and it was golden. It worked out perfectly. So as you can see, I have a little different change here as well. I have the multimeter set up over here so that you can see the numbers. I saw in the last video that you couldn't see the numbers over here, so hopefully you can see a little better this time around. And we'll do it again. But again, always go back to your temperature gauge if you have any issue with your oil pressure or your fuel gauge itself. Also, in the last video, I noticed that as I was testing the temperature gauge, that the oil gauge was I did a full sweep of the oil gauge as well, and I basically just had it grounded out on that. So basically when I'm flipping this up, I had contact with the ground and I had contact with the number 3 pin, which basically goes to the oil gauge there as well. So just when you do it yourself, you're not going to be trying to flip up and down here, so just make sure that all your connections are set as they should be. So all right, so here we are again. All right, so I'm back to the fuel gauge and I have all my connections set up on back. Again, main power going to the temperature gauge. I have my lead going to the potentiometer, which is grounded on the battery, going to the number 3 or number 7, yeah, number 7 pin, which is my fuel gauge, and I have the power probe grounded to the peg here. I think I mentioned in the last video that if you don't have a power probe, you actually can just run a direct wire around and use that as your power source. However, you have to put a 1 to 5 amp fuse on that system. Okay, so if you have any kind of like any kind of issue at all, you need to make sure that you have some kind of safety feature in place to make sure you don't melt what you got going on here. Also, if you are not using a power probe, then you have to disconnect that power every single time. Okay, so for me, pushing the power probe button power on is like turning the ignition key on, and then me letting my finger up is like turning the ignition off. Okay, so versus you having a constant power source that needs to be removed. And I want to really stress that so you don't melt anything. So that's it. All right, so moving back up here to the fuel gauge. So I put, stay on. All right, so I put the fuel gauge faceplate. Make sure these don't ground out. All right, I put the fuel gauge faceplate, all right, on the oil gauge. Okay, so you can see, you're going to be able to see exactly what, you know, where it brings itself up to here, and I'll show you how to adjust that as well. All right, so again, let's see, going over to my cheat sheet, and for fuel, let's see, for fuel for half tank, we are setting it for 23 ohms. Okay, so 23 ohms is the resistance. So set my multimeter to ohms. Move from continuity to resistance, and from there, oh, look at that, 23.6. And when you're messing with your potentiometer, I tell you what, you can spend 6 months trying to hit 23, and sometimes you get right on the money and sometimes you don't, but just get close is the general idea. But on the TSM, it gives you a range of ohms. Okay, so it gives you a range. So it just lets you know that, you know, if you're close, then you're close here. Okay, so all right, we're all set up. Let me power up, and let's watch our fuel gauge. Where are we going to go? Okay, so this is what would happen right here if you took an oil gauge and just took the faceplate of your fuel gauge and put it on. That's where you would end up going. Okay, so if you're okay with that, money, there you go. If you're not okay with that, let me show you how to fix this. Okay, so stop. Okay, so we have it removed, and again, same method for popping this off. Basically, I'm just working my way around the slip here, all the way around, and remember not to go too crazy on one spot. Hey, just like that. Okay, great example of bending it. All right, so slightly bent, and I forced it trying to get into a hurry. Got things to do today. So you don't want to grab it by the tip and try to bend it down. Okay, so it's to say it's fragile would be an understatement. So something flat like so, touching the base and just slowly taking it down. Boom, done. Okay, all right, so there's 2 points inside of this. Let me see, let me put up my palm, might be easier to focus on. Okay, so there's 2 points. All right, now inside, you can see this little opening. Let's see, this little like keyhole right here, and this little keyhole right here. Both of these need to be adjusted to get this to fall within the ohm range that we want it to be to show a half tank of fuel. Okay, so again, both these need to be adjusted. So here's the pivot point on this one, and here's the pivot point on this one up here. So the thing you're going to actually pull from are these 2 guys right here though. Okay, so in the past, well, I would just say probably all the time, so this one I pull. Okay, so the bottom one I pull and the top one I push. The bottom one I pull, the top one I push. And the bottom one is attached to the base of the shaft here, and the top one that you see up here is attached, come on, focus, to the other portion of the upper part of the base, which goes up and connects that circuit right there. Okay, hopefully you can see that. So before I figured out this whole oil gauge system here, I figured out how to essentially restore these. So you can restore it if you basically just have some corrosion or rust built up on the little windings. So if you do have corrosion built up here, if you get a brass brush or just something really soft to lightly clean this, and from there go through and do your test again and see if it starts to work for you. If it does not, you can clean it again gently, and then repeat that process. So if you do get it to work and you plug it in, life is golden. What I would then do is take a little dielectric and just basically coat those wires right there, because essentially you just wore off the top layer of protection there. So put a little bit of dielectric, not a mountain of it, but just a little bit, just to keep some moisture out of it, and go from there. Now the bases right here, if you have heavy corrosion or rust basically in these bases right here, it's where the wire connects at. Let's see if you can see that. So right here is where the wires connect. If you have rust in there, it's pretty toasty. I would just get rid of it and just get a new one, because every one I've tried to save that has rust right here, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't come back at all. And unless you're the world's greatest solderer, I mean, maybe you can. I don't personally want to try to solder that tiny little wire back on there though. But if you can, that'd be awesome. In fact, if you can, shoot a video of it and put it in this video, because I'd love to see that. That'd be impressive. All right, so I'm gonna grab my hook, and I'm gonna have a difficult time holding it for you to see. I've done it so many times, I have a general idea of exactly where I want it to go. So just know on this bottom one, I'm gonna hook it and pull it just a little bit. And okay, on the top one, I'm going to push it. So what I do is I use my little hook, but I use it as a, see if you can see it, I use it like a pry bar. Okay, so when I hook on, put my finger on the bottom of the gauge itself, and I use it to kind of pull on it and pry up. So I'm not prying on any wires or anything. And then when I push, I just do the opposite, where I use my finger again and just kind of put against the gauge. I go into that little key opening, and then just lightly push on it. Okay, and that, in my experience, is typically enough to get it to move here. So I'm sorry, I'm not holding it perfect here, guys. Okay, it's just a little bit. It's not a lot. In fact, if you feel like you need to move it a lot, because if you move this one down and that one across, you're moving further than you might think. So it actually moves quite a bit there. So let's see about putting this back on. This time, be more careful. Alright, now I'm not going to leave this needle out like this, but I'm going to leave it like this to test it. There you go. There we go. Okay. So the way I have it bent out, it might be difficult to see, but it's basically adjusted up right at the beginning of the power band right there. So let's see if I did it right. Okay, remember to alternate sides gently. Inspect to make sure you have everything flush and you have it in the location pins or slots. Alright, game on, let's do it again. Alright, hooking the power to temperature gauge, which is that top right hand post. Alright, hooking up my ground for both the power probe and the potentiometer. Alright, setting the multimeter to resistance. Let's see, I believe it's 23. Let me check my cheat sheet. Yeah, so half tank is 23 ohms. So let's see. Come on, baby. Money. All right. So, or close. All right. So, 23 ohms. I tap my, let's see, I have my lead going from the potentiometer to the pin for the fuel, which is number 7. Always check the cheat sheet, never go off memory. Number 7, fuel, which is the third one down, 1, 2, 3, pin. Okay, so starting from the top, 1, 2, 3. And I keep picking and moving this up side to side here, guys, and if your leads are touching or grounding out on any other you know, metal or gauge or anything, it's going to skew your readings here. Okay, so when you do it yourself, you're going to be able to have it upright like so. So just know I'm kind of overly cautious, trying not to let these ground themselves out on other gauges and such. Okay, all right, money. Let's see. And when I did that, my potentiometer changed. So all right, 23. All right, so let's see what we got. Eureka. All right, so half tank of fuel. All right, so we're now set to half tank, and you're good to go right there. So just know, if remember, you can use the earlier fuel gauge, or excuse me, the earlier, less expensive oil gauge for both the early fuel gauge and late fuel gauge. So basically, if you want to take your early, excuse me, if you need to purchase an oil gauge, you can purchase the less expensive earlier oil gauge, which is $74.75, and use it on your 76 to 90 or 76 to 85 cluster there. Okay, and basically you just need to switch out the faceplate right there. And let's see, that's it. So it'll take a minute for that to go all the way down right there. All right, so next, let's test your lights. Okay, now your lights are different. Your lights are essentially, they're driven by 12 volts. Okay, so if you have less than 12 volts, your lights may not actually light up there. Okay, so let's start with number 5, which is the top pin. Okay, so this is basically, this says illumination, which is basically just the board lights here. So it's number 5, which is the top pin here. Okay, so the top one right there. Now, all I'm going to do here is put my power probe ground back in the ground again. Okay, I'm going to use my lead because it just makes life easier. And I'm going to hook it to that pin on top. And I'm making sure not to accidentally touch any of the other pins right here. Okay, because you can do some bad things. So just here. Alright, check it out. All your lights are kicking on. Alright, so that's golden right there. Okay, remove that. Alright, next light. Let's see, let's do the high beam, which is number 6, and that's just the next one over. So number 6 is right next to it. Okay, again, let's see what I got. Okay, and that's your high beam, so that's kicking. Good. That off. Alright, let's go down the list. Alright, the next one, let's see, fuel, brake. Alright, left turn signal, let's go to number 12. Okay, number 12 is, you have a little space between what I call the Gatling gun, and the other side you have these 3 over here as well. And number 12 is right in the center there. Okay, so number 12 is right in the center, and again I'm using a lead. Okay, so left turn signal. All right, now it's not clicking because it's not connected. This is powered directly to that turn signal. Okay, so you basically have a in your let's see, fuse block, a relay that basically is the clicker. So this right here won't click. This is going directly to that turn signal. Okay, all right, so next one is, let's see, we want to go to the right turn signal, which is number 13, and number 13 is right above it. So literally right above it right here. Okay. And I'll be honest with you, I always get I get hyper focused when I do direct power. Okay, so what I mean by direct power is straight 12 volts. So I'm very, very focused to make sure that I don't accidentally ground out on a gauge or something like that that I might end up giving 12 volts to and create a really bad day. So just really focused at this point when I'm doing these lights here. Okay, so let's see. So I have my ground, and I have that. So right turn signal, boom, good to go. Money. And money. Okay, so I have my speedo out, so it makes it a little bit easier moving around. Just as a quick reminder, if you leave your speedo in, be super careful. It is a very, very not only fragile, but it's actually, the way it's calibrated is if you move it around and you're kind of bouncing around, bad things can happen. So you just want to really be careful if you're leaving your speedo in there. So hey guys, hey, thanks for taking the time to watch. I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. If you need any of the parts that you saw in today's video, just click the description below and I'll have links for parts, tools, everything that you need to basically do the exact same job yourself. Hopefully this will help you get over a hump that you're currently facing on your cluster, or give you the confidence to work on your own cluster yourself. So if you did find this video helpful, please consider hitting the subscribe button on our YouTube page, as well as choosing us for your full-size Jeep part needs. So we have lots of videos planned for the future, how to save money, just, you know, fun full-size stuff in general. So lots of stuff coming your way. And as always, guys, thanks for saving a full-size Jeep, and have a great day. Take care.